right, hello everyone. Welcome to Create and Flow, the podcast that helps you get you out of your own head, be curious, and live a fulfilling life. This is the first time we're testing out this new style where we'll be talking like we're in a dual mastermind group, but we're bringing you all in for the ride. And it'll be somewhat of a special hybrid because we're going to interject some Q&A from the audience in between. And I want to say from the bottom of our hearts that we really do appreciate you all tuning in. So thank you. Will, is there anything you'd like to add or say before we begin?
I'm just really excited, David. Especially since this is essentially the first podcast of our duo. And I would also like to mirror gratitude for all of you who sent in questions. So thank you very much.
So we're gonna start with a couple topics because it's kind of like this mastermind group where like I want to have this conversation with Will and kind of see where we can grow. And with that, failure is a big part of it. So is there any failures recently, like this past week, that you feel like you've encountered, Will? And do you feel like you extracted any lessons from it?
Totally. So very recently, I think it was yesterday actually, I was doing a voiceover for an animation, that of which the title I can't name yet because everything is in production. And the session didn't go as well as usual. I kept getting the same note from the director saying, "We need you to go bigger on this. This is great, but we need the top bigger." And the same note was bigger and bigger. Um, and in that yesterday, I felt my energy was sort of contracted. And to be frank, like from the past 2 weeks, I've picked up smoking again. And lots of League of Legends, and I haven't been the best when it came to meditation and reading and exercise and taking care of myself. And it was yesterday that I realized all of these things compounded and caught up to me. This lack of self-care, this indulging in smoking and, pastimes that weren't really contributing to my overall well-being. It definitely felt like I was having such an off day, and I felt like my emotions, I couldn't really access my emotions. And so yesterday was such an experience for me that I realized I need to change things up. I need to go back to my routine. I need to get back into meditation and start taking these practices seriously because it's those habits that brought me to where I am now in terms of how I booked this job, in terms of how I'm getting these auditions and getting callbacks. And I would have to say, even though it felt super bad yesterday, it was great in that it's a wake-up call for me to sort of steer myself instead of going into the direction where I've been heading with my lack of discipline lately. Big failure, lots of big lessons.
If you had to make it practical for the listeners, and I guess this kind of we can interject the first question that we have from the audience, and this question comes from Fluidity 13. What are some benefits of being in a rut?
Sure. I'm beginning to look at failures more as just pieces of information to just continue forward. Anytime, like, things don't really work out as planned, I take it these days as, "Okay, this is just more information." Like, yesterday, it was just more information telling me, "Hey, what you've been doing isn't working, and you need to change paths." And I think being stuck in a rut can sort of be looked at in the same way. The reason one is, like, stuck in a rut per se, I would generalize, is that there needs to be a change that needs to happen, and so what is actually happening in your reality is that it's informing you, and being stuck in a rut is almost like being in this taking the same class over and over again. You need to learn those lessons in order to pass, essentially.
Mm. Yeah, I want to add on to that, and I think it's vital to not take things personally. And I don't know how you've been dealing with that, Will, but that's something I would just kind of like write down. And that's something that I would kind of tell myself as a mantra when I meditate, like, David, don't take things personally. And I would ask myself a question like, if I weren't to take this personally, would I act any differently? What would I do? So I would ask myself those questions as well. So in terms of being in a rut, and I would also say is the benefits. Another benefit is kind of like giving you that moment of reflection. Like, okay, whatever I'm trying to do is not working. So
Mhm.
there's gotta be something new that I haven't tried, that someone or something is telling me to try. And I think is like what you said, it's we're basically put in that same class again, and it's until we learn that lesson. Am I making sense? I feel like I'm rambling right now.
Totally, totally, totally. And sometimes it's hard because well, being stuck in a rut can be a particular thing because you can be in a relationship, for an example, and feel like things aren't going anywhere. But that's just because, again, like it's trying to teach you something and it just may take a little more time. So, in that sense, I wouldn't even call, I think, in the grand scheme of things, being stuck in a rut actually isn't being stuck at all. It's just part of the path.
I love it when you reframe it like that, Will.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, we gotta just like not use that word rut. What else can we use? Well, I've always liked the term puzzle. Like, oh, I have this instead of saying I have this problem. Oh, there's this puzzle that I'm working on, because there's kind of like this subtext of like, oh, it's fun. Like puzzles are fun.
Totally. And it's solvable.
Yes, yes, that's very true. I guess adding on to the failure part. So I guess it's my turn. So I guess a recent failure for me, I don't want to kind of cheat this, but I have many failures. But I guess just from this past week, I've been more so implementing the lessons I've learned from those failures. So, for example, if people don't know, I've been trying to step up my game in terms of creating fitness content. And I was like, okay, how do I do that? I got to reach out to people, I got to collaborate. So, I've been reaching out to people, tons of rejections. So, it's like, okay, that's where uh, that was my phase of being in a rut. Like, what do I do now? I'm getting like no one wants to like work with me. No one wants to play with me. So what I was thinking, okay, so I started to like research or like and reflect like, okay, what am I doing wrong? And I would observe like I guess how I communicate with others. And I had a theory that the way I'm asking these people, it can kind of come off as like standoffish or like self entitled in a way. Like I don't, these people don't know me, but I'm just like hey, like let's do a collaborate. Like I'm demanding it in a way. So I'm like, okay, let's not ask people in that manner, but more so like, hey, like after doing some research, I've noticed that you've been posting a lot of content about this. You've been killing it. I would love to do a collaboration in which, and I'm being very specific. Like, it'd be awesome if we did like a handstand related collab. I think it would be fresh content for you, and for me, I would just love to have a fun time just meeting new people. And to come off like that, it's. I mean, I'm still being very genuine, but it's much more acceptable. I'm looking for the right word, but
I would even say it's considerate.
yeah, I agree.
Totally. Like, I mean, if you're actress, sometimes I get these emails that are like, "Hey, Will Akana, we're doing this thing on Instagram," and I'm like, "You just literally, this is an algorithm, this is a program." But if someone reaches out to you and they're like, "Hey, David, I notice you've been doing this," and they actually, they don't use your Instagram handle. It's clearly not like a phishing slash spam thing. They're sort of connecting with you. Then if they want to collaborate, yeah, that's it's so much more genuine.
Yeah, so I've been trying to just make everything just really, really personal. And before I was like, okay, it's a numbers game. I just gotta ask as much people as possible. But I've been just getting rejected left and right. But now, since I'm just taking that time to really make things personal and being like, hey, like I like this, that whatever you're doing, I'm getting a lot more feedback and a lot more people who are open to kind of work with me. So that's kind of like something that I've been doing and finding much more success in because of those failures.
Nice.
Cool. We're gonna move on to the next Q and A because I feel like it's something that it touches on a similar thread. And this question comes from E. Jerome. How to get unstuck? Breaking your habitual patterns. Will, I
Ooh.
feel like we have been on this habit game for a long time. We're trying to change ourselves. So
Yes.
we've been working hard on ourselves. We've been experimenting. We've been reading books on this.
Oh, yeah.
Will, please, you have any thoughts?
Sure. So I think most of what we do as human beings, this is a sweeping generalization, but I've heard some science to back it up, is that we are primarily creatures of habit. I mean, breaking your habits overnight or
Really?
I know, right? I'm sure you've read that many times, David. But breaking your habits, what I've learned, and I'm sure many of us can relate, it doesn't happen like within like days, weeks, even maybe like months, but like it takes such a long time. When it comes to changing one's habits, it's all about easing into it. It's all about gradual 1% every day, doing a little bit at a time until your body gets used to it. It gets you get used to it essentially. You put it into your system. Um, so I would say first and foremost, time. Time, and patience. What would you say, David?
I want to kind of create another narrative to what you said. And yeah, it's time and patience. And the reason behind that is these small wins, they they add up. And each win is kind of like another vote or not or another tally to the type of person you want to become. So, well, first before you do that, I feel like it's very important to kind of reflect on what kind of narrative do you want to tell yourself. So, if you want to get unstuck, like you got to think about what does that mean? Like what does that mean to you? So I feel like once you know that, it's like okay, you know where you want to go. So you see that top of the hill, that's point B, you're at point A. So that's when those small wins starts accumulating.
Mm,
And I feel like there's actually another approach to this in terms of I guess answering that question of breaking habitual patterns. Now, this is something from Tony Robbins, and it's something he calls the pattern interrupt. For example, if you have like a pattern of kind of breathing shallowly, slumping, having your shoulders slumped over, those are signs of, we know depression. But those are kind of things that our body have been constantly doing. So it's kind of like wired in us. So like, okay, how can we pattern interrupt that? So we have to kind of like overwhelm the previous emotion with a greater emotion. So something like excitement, joy, whatnot, and then kind of like somehow trigger ourselves to tap into that new emotion more like on command. Like I don't know the exact words like Tony Robbins was saying verbatim, but it's kind of like first changing like your posture, etc. And then you train yourself. So let's say you're out with a group of friends and you are laughing hysterically. You you do something ridiculous to kind of help you remember that state. So for example, when he would put himself in like a very high energy, high like very elated state, he would like tap his shoulder like a funny way or something. So your body remembers. Yeah, yeah, and also there's like another example that's very similar where you want to pattern interrupt. For example, there's this guy named Tom Bilyeu. He's the creator of Impact Theory, which is like self improvement kind of content on YouTube. So what he does is whenever he gets into an argument with his wife, he would just start laughing hysterically because he knows that physiologically the change in his body would change the neurochemistry in his brain. So he would like just start laughing. And strangely, he feels so much better from that and he can think more clearly again because there are times when like let's say we're in an argument with someone, we kind of just see red. Like we just see anger. So those are some two things that I want to kind of like bring up with pattern interrupt. Is that making sense? Will, is there anything you want to add to that?
yeah, I like when you're bringing up, well, first and foremost, having a clear point of where you want to be to sort of give you like a North Star when it comes to changing habits. I think that's so important. When I dedicated myself to follow NoFap for, I think my longest was like 6 months. Um, I was doing a lot of research, and this guy touted that he could help a lot of people, sort of like essentially quit pornography, quit mindless masturbation, and get on their goals. And one of the things that he would do is you have to visualize what your life would look like if you quit X, Y, and Z. Um, and in that sense, it's like, what would your friends be like? What would your job be like? How would your day to day emotions be like? And having this clear picture allows you to sort of transcend obstacles much more easier. So if it's, let's say you're quitting the habit of drinking, okay? It's one thing to just say, okay, this year I'm just gonna quit drinking and stay sober. But it's another if you create a whole vision of like, well, sober me would be like this. I would have energy to do this. I'd be surrounded by these kind of friends. So in those times of temptation or times of feeling lost, you think back to your vision and you know why you're doing what you're doing. And it sort of helps you not see red, so to speak, to borrow from what you're saying, in situations where you don't have the biggest viewpoint of the situation.
Is there any habit that you're having a hard time developing?
Well, I just quit smoking, so we're gonna see how that goes. um, In terms of developing a habit, not necessarily. I mean, I've jumped off the bandwagon, of being so consistent with, smoking, etcetera, but I've developed a sense of grace where it's like, "Okay, yeah, I'm off the path, but I'm just gonna jump back on again." I'm not gonna beat myself and spend, all this energy, beating myself up about something that I think is a very natural part of the process, and that is, going off again, coming back on. It's all about consistently coming back on, essentially.
Yeah. And a big core of this podcast is kind of like us, I feel like trying to give each other like advice or like feedback, etc. So from what I know, in order to break those habits, like for example smoking, like there's this urge or tendency to do so that you want to replace it with. So have you thought about what you want to replace that urge to smoke with?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, I understand the psychology when it comes to replacing one habit with another. However, for me and my
Mhm.
philosophy, when it comes to like smoking and video games and like PMO, um, it's like it all comes down to dopamine receptors. Like marijuana, video games, all these high stimulus, like porn, all these high stimulus things, they essentially overload your dopamine systems and they reduce the sensitivity of your dopamine receptors so that like even reading when I'm playing a lot of video games and doing all these habits I quote unquote shouldn't be doing, it's so hard to read. It's so hard to produce music because the pleasures that I get from these things, they're not registering chemically, and so I lose patience. So what I've noticed is when I quit these things over time, I don't necessarily have to replace them with new habits because, well, my habits are like reading, meditation, all these things. But I get the joy back in those things after a period of time once my dopamine receptors have been reset in their sensitivity.
Is it kind of like carrots starting to taste sweeter after you've avoided all the sugary junk food after a while?
Hell yeah, that's exactly it.
And I'm a big fan of Andrew Huberman. Do you know who he is?
No, who is he?
He's some not some, but he's a neuroscientist who has a podcast called the Huberman Lab Podcast, and he like posts some really dope content in terms of like really understanding why we behave the way we behave, and going into the neurocircuitry is like, oh, it's because of this, chemical imbalance of like the dopamine, like you said.
Right.
So what he I'm just kind of like reiterating what I've listened to like the past couple of weeks, and he was kind of talking about addiction, and it's kind of scary, like we're in this world, like each text, each like notification, every time we like browse through social media or scroll through Instagram, we get like these dopamine hits. uh, and what's also interesting as like a side thing is that you know how like people say that the younger generation, their attention span is getting shorter and shorter.
Yeah.
So like that's attributed to like the very fast paced content. So there's so much context switching, like from Instagram, from TikTok, like you're jumping from like one specific piece of content to something completely different. So like let's say I'm having this conversation with you, Will, and let's say every 10 seconds I bring out something completely random. You'll be like, what the fuck? Like David, why are you even bringing that up? So I mean that's kind of like a side thing where I feel like we're that's like a lot of dopamine hits along the way. and
Yeah.
he would say like people they like listen to a podcast, they scroll through their phones while they work out, they take pre-workout. That is a shit ton of dopamine in your system.
Yeah.
So what he would advise is like have days where it's kind of like your off days where you'll just go into workout. That's it. Like so take out the pre-workout, take out the social media, the music, whatever. Like he's not saying take it out completely, but have like an off day where you kind of reset yourself. So that's something that I've been implementing as well. Like there'll be days when I just go work out without any podcast or caffeine. It's just like, oh, and those days are hard. Like, don't get me wrong, but I feel like it does help me with like the days when I do have to like bring out my A game. Like, oh shit, like, um, I don't know, collaborating with this person. Like, I want to be really sharp and focused and be really ready. And that pre workout or caffeine is like it hits me just at the right level instead of me being acclimated to it.
Oh, I see, yeah, so in taking the days off, the days on, it just enhances it, essentially. Like, if you're drinking caffeine.
Yeah, or it's working like it's used to. Yeah.
Got you, got you. Yeah, I've also heard of something called a dopamine detox, where people go, like, periods without social media and without, like, coffee and stuff like that. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah. Have you tried it?
I have not tried it. Well, I mean, maybe last year you could consider it because last year I was sober for the whole year and just exclusively just worked on my shit.
Damn.
But, I haven't gone on, like, an official dopamine detox, you know?
Yeah. So what does that look like? Is it just no caffeine or is it like no social media, no is it just living a very lifeless life?
Right? I saw, one video, informational video about dopamine detoxing, and I think anything that can spike dopamine levels, in the least, I think, it includes caffeine, it includes video games, social media, uh uh, sexy websites, anything else that causes crazy high dopamine spikes. Probably sugar too.
I don't know if I'll be doing that anytime soon just because I don't feel like I'm very addicted to dopamine.
Yeah,
And I think we're both kind of like very mindful in terms of where we spend our time and like we're not, like on social media all day. We're getting our work done.
right.
So I feel like that's something that we could try out for an experiment, but I don't know if it's something that's on the radar anytime soon. For me, that is.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Alrighty. Okay. So we're gonna go on to the next Q&A question, and this is something that I got asked as well on my when I put it on my social media. So, and I think this will be a very good topic to set up the other topics if we have time, of course. And the question comes from I'm speaking slow so I can kind of like have time to find a name. The question comes from Mick Precra. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm sorry. It's MICPRECRA. Is the question is what is the most important book you've ever read? Like what book caused the spark? That's what he says. So, Will, do you want to give this a go?
Ooh, the spark. I would have to say the most important book I've ever read is probably also the most validating book I've read, and that was the book called Range. David, you might have heard of it. And it's Range
Wait,
because
what? Seriously?
yeah, because my whole life I've jumped from
I thought it was The Alchemist.
well, The Alchemist is spiritually the most important book for me, but in terms of practicality and philosophy, I think Range has been so validating for me. And that's because my whole life I've jumped around from subject to subject. I've done wedding videography and photography. I've done editing. I've done like behind the camera work as like assistant camera. I'm into acting. I'm doing voiceover, and I've done music and or into music at the moment. And my parents growing up would always say like you're always switching between things. And I always had this guilt about, having a wide breadth of interests. But that book was so great because it talked about how a lot of the innovation in fields came from people who had essentially sampling periods early in their life where they would jump from subject to subject and learn as much as they could because the lessons that how can we explain this, David? Because you're familiar with the book. People would make jumps in their fields because they were able to think in a way that wasn't necessarily locked in uh, for specialists in that field. Like for example, dancers who go into acting. If they're acting a scene and it requires a lot of, let's say, a breaking down, dancers have this great awareness and control over their body, and so I found in my acting classes, dancers especially are so comfortable moving on stage. And I think just having sort of a wide breadth of experiences in many different things essentially allows you to look at each new thing with a greater context or awareness of how it can be approached, if that makes sense.
Dude, it makes perfect sense. And I don't know why, but I feel so connected with you because that is also the book that's changed my life the most.
Well, whoop-de-doo.
Did you read that when we first met? I remember we talking about it when we first had our like lunch conversation.
Oh, so for those of you who don't know, David and I know each other because my sister, you were on set with her, right? On one of her music videos. And she offered to just like, she was like, "You guys are both cool people. Like, like you guys should." She matchmaked us essentially. She's like, "Go have lunch and just charge my Venmo." I was like, "Oh, okay, this is dope." But yeah, when we were first texting each other, I said one of my favorite books was Range, and you texted, "Dude, this is destiny. I also love Range," and I was like, "This is gonna be a great friendship."
Oh, I remember. Yeah, I remember. I remember. Um, okay, so to add on to what you said, oh my god, I have so much thoughts on this book. I read it like 3 times now. So basically, what you're talking about, how like the dancers are very fluid with their movements when they're acting, and a lot of innovations come from people outside the field. And it's because when we specialize, especially when we specialize early, we're like hammers, and everything is looking like a nail. That's why innovation comes from people outside, usually outside of that field, because they have a fresh perspective, a fresh lens. And the whole theme of the book, Range, is that people like Tiger Woods, those people are the exception and not the rule. So, yes, there are people who become very successful by implementing those 10,000 hours. However, a lot more people, they become successful through the Roger Federer route by, like you said, having that sampling period and really seeing what really fits well for them, and then they kind of mix and match and they kind of create their own lane. And I feel like it's not, or the author kind of states it where it's not very sexy to do so. They like that story of like, oh, Tiger Woods putting in those long work hours at the age of like 2, and then like becoming the successful person like he is today. Like it's very clear cut. It's like you get it. Like you see people in their 40s and like, let's say they don't have their shit together, like we look down on them. But people in those years, like they can still like hit that tipping point, because luck is very much a factor as well. Like for example, Robert Greene, he's a great author. He's the creator of the 48 Laws of Power. He didn't write his book till I think like age 40, and like that's when he really made it big as an author. Before that, he was just like doing part-time jobs like here and there. And you know, me and you know, like the creator of KFC, like Colonel Sanders, like he made a success at like age 60 something, right?
Yeah, yeah, it was well into his middle age, upper middle age.
Yeah. So, I mean, and now I understand why that book's resonated with you so much. Because, like you said, maybe I just wasn't listening the first time we were talking. But you said that you're interested in all these different things, and your parents were like, "Why the hell are you interested in all these different things? You should focus on one thing."
Right.
So, for myself, I guess it comes from an opposite kind of road where I was forced to do only one thing by my parents. I grew up doing taekwondo and only doing taekwondo until I finally like left my parents at age like 20. So like that's a long time to do just taekwondo. Like literally after school, my life would be go to my dad's taekwondo studio, work till about 9 10 p.m. when it closes, and then I'd be just too tired to do my homework and study. So I wouldn't even study. Like I would like so my grades were crap. I was just miserable. I was just like, wow, is this my life? Am I just gonna do taekwondo all day? It's not even something that I enjoyed. It was something that I was forced to do. So I got scared when during my later years of college and when I came out of my parents, like, oh shit, like I developed no skill set. Like the only thing I know is how to kick people. And like what that's not gonna get me anywhere. Yeah. So it's like I was having like an existential breakdown. Like, wow, like what am I gonna do? But after reading this book, it's been so refreshing because I know that okay, I'm still in my 20s. I still have this time to really explore. And in the book Range, he talks about all your past experiences. They can actually be beneficial. Like we just don't know it yet. So that's kind of like how I've been operating with my life. Like whatever I've learned through my years in taekwondo, like teaching classes, like kids and adults, and like learning how to observe movement, learning how to be creative with like performance, because like I was like very, I guess, involved in the performance team. So I'm like, okay, there's all of that things that I've done, that I've accumulated. Now, just because I'm not implementing that into my life right now, that doesn't mean it was a waste of my time or a waste of my life.
Right, right.
Like it's kind of like things that are staying dormant, and then there'll be moments when I awaken new skills because of that experience. So, for example, I feel like anytime I'm thinking of something creative with like fitness content, I can very much attribute it to how I was creating these taekwondo performances. Cause like I would like find the music and like I would think about like, okay, this person can do this person can do that. How can I add that, combine that together? So like I was thinking like that as a kid. So that's why the book Range has been so impactful for me, and it's been giving me a lot of hope in terms like, okay, since I'm in my 20s, like, okay, I have to really just explore instead of being guilty for like just trying to explore, and instead of focusing on one thing. Like I feel very comfortable and very renewed. Is that the right word? I feel just very like, yes, like invigorated. Like I'm supposed to do this. I'm supposed to explore. I'm supposed to like fuck shit up. I'm supposed to make all these mistakes. So therefore, when I'm in like my 30s and 40s, everything will come together.
Totally, totally, and knowledge is accumulated from a vast, like, breadth of different experiences. I feel like as kids, we're sort of expected and to specialize from an early age, you know? Like, what are you gonna do? Like, what are you gonna major in college so early? But honestly, like, I don't even use my college degree. You know? I thought I was gonna do a lot of, like, behind the camera stuff, but I was accumulating all this, essentially information around, the camera, but now when I'm making films, I've had my fingers dipped in many different areas when it comes to sound, when it comes to visual, when it comes to music, when it comes to editing, and now when it comes to acting, so it all sort of comes together, and at the time, you know, first being interested in editing and camera work, I had no idea that I was going to use all of these pieces I was accumulating at a later time, so, it feels I'm like you, I feel like all these things, they in the end, they made sense, they evened out.
Yeah, and if for those listening, I also want to share like in the book he shares this the author shares this study where like the people who were like undecided in college, like they had an undeclared major, those people like ended up higher in like the income whatever bar just because they took the time to really try out these different classes and try to like pick the subject or topics that fit best for them.
Yeah, I think that's you're bringing up a great point about trying to see what you actually like. Like, instead of being like, "I'm gonna do this for the rest of my life," well, have you tried other things? Have you tried that thing that you say you wanna do, and how do you like that? I think it's sort of putting the power back into, like, well, what do I actually resonate with, and what kinda actions can I take, and not being afraid to sort of explore a field, and if you're not into it, just go into another one.
Yeah, you know that's what Leonardo da Vinci did. So in he also puts in the book like that's he would go gung ho on one subject, and then once he found out, I was like, nope, this is not right for me. He pivoted and he went gung ho on another subject. He's like, nope, it's not right for me. He pivoted. He repeated that process so many times, and then finally at the end, he's like in his 30s. He's like, it was like his first time taking like an art class, like seriously, like a formal art class. And then randomly out of the blue, like some like he was able to like mesh all these things together, and then voila, like he is who he is today, or like or he who he was.
Yeah, I like that you're saying that he went gung ho because it's not like he was just dilly dallying in one subject, sort of dabbling, right? We're sort of in a quote unquote dabbling culture, some might say, but like gung ho as in like
Hmm.
really exploring it to the maximum depth as long as you have that interest, because you could be interested in something and that interest will carry you through to the very depths of it or allow you to go to the depths of it, but also trust that that interest won't always be there. You might lose interest someday. So if you have interest in a subject, utilize that time to really go to the depths as far as you can go because you don't know when that fire will expire.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because that's something that I've been thinking about as well. Because we're supposed to be dabbling, as in like sample all these different things, try them out, but it's actually a very hard process because when we mean gung ho and like what we mean by Leonardo da Vinci going gung ho, he wrapped his identity around trying to be the best at that thing. So imagine him coming out of that field or that topic, whatever. Like it's very much going through like another existential crisis.
Oh yeah.
But if we are if we're able to come out of that, like and we come out stronger, and then we dive deep into like another topic, like we need that level of focus, and that's something that, like I said, I've been thinking about because there are times when I feel like, am I really trying my best at like doing this thing, or am I just like dipping my toes in? And I think from like Leonardo's story, like I feel like there are times when I am not going all in, and it's kind of like a reminder, like David, I have to really commit myself. And what does that mean? What does that look like? That means really being obsessed, like spending the whole day researching on this whatever topic is. And it's hard. It's I have to say it's hard.
Right, and I think it's much easier to dip one's toes in and not go all the way in exploring a subject because we may not trust ourselves enough. We may not trust that we're doing this for a reason. We might be in this comparison game of like, well, am I really making, my time useful? Am I really doing this for a good purpose? When it's I think it's so much simpler if we just trust that we're inspired to pursue something and trust that's for a reason because in my experience it always is.
Hmm. You make me want to reread the book again. It's been so good.
Sponsored by no, we're not sponsored.
I mean, we can dive deeper into the book, but I'm kind of preventing myself to do so just because there are some other Q&A questions that I want to get to.
Hmm.
And the other Q&A question, and I think this would be the last one for today just because there are some other topics that I'd want to cover with you, Will. So the last Q&A question, this is actually like a real good one. This comes from RHEAMALLARI _ yeah, I have no idea how to pronounce that, but thank you for the question. She puts down, how does culture in your art community, ethnic background, and country influence you? And this is fucking deep, but let's try our best to keep things lighthearted and just and say whatever that is, on our mind. Will, have you thought about this?
Yeah, yeah, actually I think I know who posted this. I think it's my friend Ria that I met on set. um so how does it's like a three-part question, right? How does culture, how does I'm trying to pull it up.
You can separate it, or you can just blend them all together. Range style.
How does culture in your art community, ethnic background, and country influence you? Well, let's start with culture, for example. I mean, I feel like in the West we have such I mean, compared to the East, it's such like a go go go, be productive, do this, do that, be specialized. You got to be something, get enough, and that's even funny enough. That's even translated into the influencer like community of Am I getting enough likes? What's my engagement like? Am I still relevant? There's such a culture of I need to be important, I need to stay on top of it, or I'm gonna like fall by the wayside. I need to do this, otherwise I'm not gonna be, looked at as a great human being, essentially, if you want to get really basic about it. And I think this can influence us totally, totally. And a lot of it, if we're gonna look at the real picture of it, a lot of it can contribute to a lot of suffering, right? I've fallen into this as well, where when I started to get a lot of engagement and a lot of traction on social media, it was a lot of fun at first, but then also it gets to your head like, well, how can I maintain it? How can I build it more? Is my content making a splash when I share it? And it can be stressful over things that, you're sharing content, you're creating art, you're connecting with people. It can be stressful to do these things that should be fun and that should be, enriching for your life.
Here, here, preach, Will. And yeah, that's a good point. I actually did not think about that when I was kind of taking a moment this morning to think about that question. And for me, it was more so like I was thinking about my childhood in terms of like, okay, how did that affect me in terms of culture? Like I grew up without any role models. I've always felt inferior being Asian American. Like sad to say. Like for example, whenever I felt like this girl who was a different ethnicity, like whenever I was like, oh, like she's so pretty, like maybe I should ask her out. I would start I'll start putting them on a pedestal. Like I'm not good enough. Um, so that's kind of like the upbringing that I had, and I don't know if that's exclusive to me or that's a lot of other Asian Americans. I mean, I do hear some Asian Americans talking about it, but not a lot. Maybe it's just a personal issue. I don't know, but that's something that I've thought about, and I guess in terms of if we're sticking with the stereotype thing, I guess the good part of it was I was like expected to be a good fighter because I was Asian. So, I mean that pushed me in terms of like training hard at the Taekwondo studio. Like, oh, I'm supposed to be good.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I guess if I were to give myself like any like lesson or advice, it'd be like try to surround myself who would push me more. And I still kind of wish that today. I wish I do have more people to kind of expect more from me who would push me because I feel like I am capable of a lot of things, but I guess when it's everything is just self motivated, it gets taxing very quickly. So for example, like let's say I'm training by myself and I'm training with people. Like a very simple example. When I'm training with others, like when I'm on the beach on Sundays with all these pro, bodybuilders, gymnasts, even though like I've intake if even though I've had like no caffeine in my system, like I feel like I've had like double shots of espresso. Like I'm on fire just because the energy is so high compared to like me by myself. It's like it's just like a normal workout. So I wish I had more people who kind of just push me more. And yeah, I guess to just add on to what you said, it is kind of overwhelming if we kind of think about like, oh, like we're always trying to like do more, be productive, etc.
Mhm.
I guess I'm coming at it from a different angle, and I think I'm only coming at it at a different angle, and I think you can attest to this is because we've done a lot of inner work where we're at the point now where we're looking at the right scorecard. We're not really focusing too much now on the external metrics like, oh, am I getting these likes? Am I getting these followers? It's more so like, am I being the best person I can be? Am I better than yesterday? Especially for myself, I feel like I've been measuring myself in those standards a lot more these days. So that's been mentally more just like relaxing and rewarding, and I'm just more clear headed, if that makes sense.
Totally, totally. And, I share with you that the ethnic background and how it influences us, for sure, being, Asian American, I definitely had some experiences in school that made me think a bit less of myself, but it all contributes. But hey, you know, uh, 10 what is it? The 10 Rings? The latest Marvel movie, Asians are sort of making an appearance in,
Oh, Shang-Chi.
Yeah, Shang-Chi, there we go,
Yeah.
Shang-Chi. Asians are making an appearance in Hollywood and social media, and that's great because we can grow up, and if we have a crush on a girl who is another ethnicity, we may or may not have more confidence knowing that, Asian Americans are we belong in America just as much as everyone.
Yeah, I mean that's not something. Fortunately, I feel like that's something I've overcame now, but that's definitely something that I faced in my younger years.
For sure, for sure.
All right, so the last couple questions, or not questions, but topics I want to go over with you, Will, I guess to kind of like stay in this theme of like, okay, what should we focus on this upcoming week? What kind of advice or thoughts we can like kind of bounce off each other? Is first one, is there anything that you've been experimenting with? There's something you've been working on? Like what are some of the wins that you've had? I feel like that's important to cover as well.
Gotcha. I'll let you take the floor for this one first.
Yeah, I feel like I've been I've been putting the spotlight on you too quickly. So I guess for experimenting, actually no, I'll start off with the wins. So I guess for the wins, I've been sleeping a lot better.
That's good.
So and that's something that we both prioritize. Yeah, and what's been helping me with that is I've been kind of having not a hard rule, but a generic rule where I'll stop drinking water at about like 2, 3 in the afternoon. Like I'll take sips here and there, but the majority of my water intake is in the morning. So therefore, I can stop waking up in the middle of the night to use the restroom. So that's a win. I have not waken up in the middle of the night this past 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Uh, so big win there.
Nice.
I guess another win is I think you do this as well. Just taping our mouth shut when we sleep.
Oh, yeah.
So I feel like I've been recovering a lot quicker in terms of after my workouts. Uh, after doing, I think I've been doing this for almost 2 months now. So that's made a big, not too big, but somewhat of it moved the needle a little bit in terms of my recovery.
Nice.
So I guess those are some wins that I kind of want to give out. Yeah, that's what I have so far.
Gotcha. For I guess my biggest win is like recently, I would say I know more of my value when it comes to voiceover and the services I render. In that when I'm negotiating with clients, I'm much more like, no, this is my rate. And if we can fudge it a little bit if you're on budget, but otherwise, like this is I know what my worth is. And I can't say this is well, it's definitely not always been the case, but it's a recent comeuppance because I've been doing this now for quite a while, and it's just been recently where I'm like, "Oh, no, I'm actually confident in that, like, no, this is what I charge." And if and I can tell like, "No, no, no, this client is lowballing, just say no." You know what I mean? So that's been great. That's definitely a win for me, and a milestone for me in my voiceover career.
Nice, dude. Good shit. I like to hear that.
Thanks,
Yeah.
thanks.
All right. So what are some goals that you have on your list for the upcoming week? I mean, you can talk about broader terms as well, like the month, but I'd focus on the week, and I think it's good to kind of like share that publicly, just so we can. Not only is it me kind of like keeping you accountable, but I guess the whole world is helping you stay accountable, which is awesome.
Sure. I quit smoking as of yesterday. And when I was at the dispensary, I was telling all the bud tenders I know, that were there, I was like, "This is the last time I'm coming in." And so it has created this social, what do you call it? Obligation where I can't show up there again after saying that. Like, for me personally, that would be so shameful to be like, tell everyone, "I'm not you'll never see me again." And then show up, like, anytime later. So, for me, my week, goal is, well, it's quit smoking and get back on my habits because I've fallen off.
Yeah, it's called a social contract. Something for the listeners, there's a book called Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. I feel like that's a very powerful book if anyone's interested in that topic. So yeah, this is definitely another form of social contract, just letting this out. So for myself, I guess it's just fully preparing myself for the upcoming collaborations I have. I have two this upcoming week. So what I mean by fully prepared, that means like really sit down, think, and write down. Okay, what do I feel like will give the most value to this person, and just try to really do my best in terms of uh, fostering those relationships, because I feel like that's especially important. Especially, I mean, this is something that we can touch up on another day, but it was definitely a topic that we had in mind, which is like just in relationships in general. And I feel like, uh, just to summarize my view right now, is that like we are in our 20s, and I feel like it only gets harder to really cultivate relationships. So whenever I have the opportunity, it's like, okay, let's really be present. Like, let's really try to, like, I want to just do my best in terms of like, I may never have this chance to speak with this person again. Like, thinking about like my own mortality as well. So I feel like that's just something that I've been keeping in mind. So yeah, that's one of my goals. The other one is just doing my due diligence in reaching out to more people to collaborate with, and I feel like that's something that's in my control. If I Whether I get rejected or not, like, oh well, I can't take it personally. I can just do my best in terms of learning what I can do better. But I can definitely set that metric in terms of, okay, I want to at least reach out to two more people this week. So yeah, so those are my two goals that I want to share with people. And when we have a
Very cool. What kind of collaborations are they?
Oh, their fitness collaborations, in terms of like we'll be doing like a crazy combo online, or like just having like a workout type of partner duel, where it's kind of just fresh content online, and kind of like trying to help motivate people to be more active. I mean, especially like during the winter times, like it can be very comforting to just stay home. But it's like, no, let's have fun. Let's try to learn these skills. That's something that I try to pretty much promote on my page. Like, the best fitness or nutrition or like diet is the one that you can stick to every day. And how can you stick to it? It's just by having fun, trying out new things. Like, if it's bouldering, do bouldering. If you like skiing, go skiing. And I want to kind of just show like these, like in the book range. You can kind of transfer these skills to other domains, like what I've been doing. Like, the skills that I've learned in calisthenics, I can very much translate it over to pole dancing or to acro yoga or yoga in general. So I like to showcase that, and hopefully that gives like a message of like motivating them in terms of like, oh yeah, like, not only will I look good as a byproduct, uh not only will I be healthy, but it's just pretty cool and pretty fun that I can do this with my body, and then I'll be able to do that and that and that and that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's progressive, and that's always exciting to be like, "Oh shit, I leveled up and it's physical and I can see it and feel it and I'm stronger." Yes.
Definitely. So yeah, those are my goals. Is there anything else that you want to cover, Will?
I see we're running close to time, but no, I would say we've covered quite a bit. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
I want to add that we will be covering more Q&A on the next one. So people, listeners, please feel free to send in more of your questions, because these are, I feel like, very good questions, and like something that a lot of people should think about more often. I think it's easier when there's other people kind of like sharing their thought process with it as well. And secondly, just thank you again for the listeners. Thanks for tuning in. If you made it this far, I really appreciate you joining us on our journey.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, this is our first time sort of doing this dynamic duo like this, and we've loved answering your questions and sharing our journey. It's great points and it's low points. It's all one thing anyway, so really appreciate it.
All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. And if you can leave us a review, that would be awesome. We are on all platforms where you can listen to podcasts. So whatever you're listening this on, uh, Apple, Spotify, wherever you can kind of leave a review, it would really help us kind of reach out to more people. So we we would really appreciate that. And other than that, again, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you in the next one. Peace.
Peace.